Now to this case of media censorship and political bias that helped smooth the way for Joe Biden to win the 2020 election campaign. President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is currently a full-time painter living in the Hollywood Hills and exhibiting across in New York City. It's a world away, of course, from the high-profile wheeling and dealing life he lived while his dad was vice president and Hunter was building up a substantial wealth. Thanks to a treasure trove of information left on Hunter's abandoned laptop and a detailed book about it, Laptop from Hell, by New York-based Australian journalist Miranda Devine, we now know that Hunter Biden's life was a sordid mix of drugs, sex and betrayal as he blatantly traded on the name and power of his father. I caught up with Miranda earlier.
Well, you've summarised it really well, Chris. It is extraordinary to think that this man who's now in his middle age, 52, and with no visible skills and horrendous drug addiction and sex addiction and prostitute addiction and just shocking personal life, could have come into tens of millions of dollars paid to him as this sort of international man of mystery. And he certainly wasn't paid for his great business acumen because he could barely string a sentence together for much of the 9 years that the laptop covers. He just couldn't function as a normal person, let alone a businessman. He had a lot of people around him, basically business partners and, women who would just prop him up and put him into rehab and answer his emails for him and answer his phone calls for him and pour him onto a plane. He did have this uncanny knack of being able to scrub up. I mean, he's quite a handsome man, dress well and show up at a meeting and look vaguely compass for a couple of hours before he went back on another bender. But I left in a bit of personal stuff just to show the really kind of abusive relationships that he was in, first with his ex-wife, Kathleen, who seemed to have been a lovely woman, quite badly betrayed by Hunter, and then with his sister-in-law, who he had an affair with after his beloved brother died of brain cancer.
Yeah, look, it's just an extraordinary tale. And of course, it's all come to light because of this laptop that he'd left behind. Now, you and others at the New York Post broke these stories in the election campaign before Joe Biden was voted into the presidency. You've revealed details that show Joe Biden was aware of his son's business interests and involved in them up to a degree. Yet there was this amazing cover-up in the lead up to the election where other media wouldn't touch this story and even big tech wouldn't circulate the stories that were being printed in the New York Post.
Yes, well, I mean, that was because they were in the tank for Joe Biden. The imperative really in the entire kind of establishment of America was to get rid of Donald Trump by hook or by crook. And that meant didn't matter if Joe Biden was a serial killer, he was going to be pushed into the White House and pushed over the line in the election. Joe Biden was not just aware of what his son Hunter was doing overseas in his name. He was intimately involved, and there is some evidence on the laptop that he financially benefited. And Hunter talks to relatives on a number of occasions with great bitterness about having to be basically the money earner, the rain man for the entire family. He complains to his grown-up daughter at one point, you're lucky you don't have to give half your salary to Pop, which was their name for Joe Biden. There's evidence of shared bank accounts, shared debit cards, and also that Hunter Biden was paying some of the household expenses for Joe Biden at his luxurious house in Delaware, which is a lavish mansion on an estate, which would cost a lot for upkeep. And it looks as if Hunter was paying at least some of those bills for painting and new shutters and new air conditioning for a cottage on the estate. It shows at the very least that Joe Biden lied to the American people during the election campaign when he said he knew nothing about his son Hunter's overseas business dealings. But it also shows that Joe was meeting Hunter's business partners from Kazakhstan and Mexico and Ukraine and Russia and China. He met them and made it very clear that Hunter was his agent, a so-called princeling, as the Chinese like to call the family members who are paid the bribe, rather than, they don't bribe the actual official, because that would be silly. So they give that money or those favours to a relative. And that is the way Hunter Biden was regarded by oligarchs in Russia, corrupt oligarchs that he was hanging out with, and also the senior members of the CCP in China.
Extraordinary stuff, Miranda. Congratulations on getting it all into the public arena. You can easily get the book via Amazon, as I have done here in Australia. As I say, it's on the bestseller lists in the US. But just finally, Miranda, is the censorship continuing? Do you have a situation where some booksellers won't even stock your book, where some elements of the media want to ignore your book and all the revelations inside it?
Well, definitely, there is some of that. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN and so on, they suppressed the story, ignored it, traduced it as Russian disinformation before the election campaign. So just as is happening now with this Durham investigation and all the Russia collusion stories falling apart, that section of the media has egg on its face, and it's certainly not going to turn around and admit that it was wrong, because it's not just a matter of making an error and having to fix it. This is an entrenched form of journalistic corruption that's occurring in America, and it's quite frightening, and it's very damaging, especially to the public trust in the media overall, and I think that's unhealthy.
Well, they were wrong, and you've exposed it brilliantly, Miranda. Thanks so much for joining us, and good luck.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Telling stuff there. Miranda Devine really shaking it up in the States, isn't she?